Hey everyone, it's Darth Nihilus here back to you today with another video, and in today's topic of discussion, I wanted to talk about the fact that Eminem should have released his Slim Shady LP album on exactly November 13 in the year 1998, and no later than that. And I wanted to start off this video by saying that what I find very interesting, myself personally, about Eminem's Slim Shady LP album is that I'm pretty sure, or most likely sure, in other words, that he originally intended to release that album of his in the year of 1998. Him, along with Dr. Dre, of course. And the reason I say that is because Eminem had an original track list for his Slim Shady LP album all ready and set to go. And if you don't believe me, you can look it up for yourselves, and it is called the Slim Shady LP Unmastered Sequence. And you can literally look it up on the internet and, go to Google Images for yourselves and see that what I say is true. Originally, that was supposed to be the track list of Eminem's Slim Shady LP album, and it was slightly different. I mean, somewhat the same to what we eventually ended up getting, but it was somewhat different. And the differences between the unmastered sequence of his Slim Shady LP album and the Slim Shady LP album tracklist that he ended up releasing is that on the original unmastered sequence of Eminem's Slim Shady LP album is that he had some songs on that sadly and unfortunately did not make it onto the final cut of the Slim Shady LP album that he ended up having to release. And those songs were the uncensored band version of his song Hi, My Name Is, and in the uncensored band version there are slightly different lyrics than the version we ended up getting. Like, instead of saying, my English teacher wanted to flunk me in junior high, thanks a lot, next semester I'll be 35. In the uncensored band version of that song, he says, my English teacher wanted to have sex with me in junior high. The only problem was my English teacher was a guy. And then he says, still just like the version of that song that he released, I chased him around a desk with a stapler, stapled his nuts to a stack of paper. But in the also uncensored band version, he also has a line where he says, extraterrestrial while we're running over pedestrians while I'm raping lesbians. Like, he had a line about running over pedestrians and raping lesbians, which he censored in the version of his song that he ended up releasing, which I think is unfortunate, because I honestly could have done without him saying that his English teacher wanted to have sex with him in junior high and that his English teacher was a guy. But I would have at least wanted him to have still put in the final version of that song of his, running over pedestrians and raping lesbians. At least that those lines, I wish he would have kept uncensored in the final version of that song. But anyways, continuing on, in the unmastered sequence of his Slim Shady LP album, he also had different tracks or songs, in other words, that sadly and unfortunately did not make it onto the final cut or version, if you will, of his Slim Shady LP album. And what those songs or tracks, in other words, were Take the World With Me, featuring Pace One and Bizarre. He also had the unmastered sequence versions of Low Down Dirty, No One's Iller Than Me featuring D12, and Murder Murder, which were originally on his Slim Shady EP released in late 1997, on December 15 of 1997 to be exact, when Eminem himself was 25 years old. But he was going to have like Slim Shady LP versions of those three songs or tracks of his, which would have been really awesome, because those are some of my all-time favorite Eminem songs, and I really wish and would have loved it more than anything if we would have gotten those songs on the final version of his Slim Shady LP album, or at least maybe a 10th year anniversary deluxe edition. But also he was going to have a slightly different version of his song As the World Turns, which had a different sample than the one that he ended up having to release on the final version or cut of his Slim Shady LP album, which is really sad and unfortunate because I would have much rather preferred the original unmastered sequence version of his song As the World Turns, because I preferred the sample that Eminem and Dr. Dre had used for the original unmastered sequence of Eminem's song As the World Turns, instead of the one released on the final version of his Slim Shady LP album. But the reason why Eminem and Dr. Dre were not able to release the unmastered sequence of Eminem's song As the World Turns is because the artists that they were sampling, even though they changed up the sample and like chopped it or screwed it or whatever and changed it in a lot of ways, the artists, still were able to hear or detect their sample being used, and they expected Eminem and Dr. Dre to pay them $75,000 just to have their sample cleared, which I think is fucked up and just really messed up. And I'm really pissed off and just really hate Dr. Dre and Eminem for not trying to battle them more over that sample, or at least try to come to some sort of agreement, or like say like, we'll pay you half of 75,000 or something. I just really wish that Eminem and Dr. Dre would have fought more to get that sample cleared instead of chickening out and being such weak pussies and just giving up so easily without making at least any kind of attempt or effort to fight for their right to get that sample for Eminem's song cleared, the original sample for the original version of Eminem's song As the World Turns. Because honestly, I really fucking hate the version of that song of his that he released on his Slim Shady LP album, because the original unmastered sequence version of Eminem's song As the World Turns had a way better sample. The original sample that Eminem and Dr. Dre used sounded really like mystical and out of this world and kind of like almost synthwave ambient kind of type of rap beat, and I thought it just was really awesome and epic and amazing and incredible and out of this world, literally. But they weren't able to get the original sample of that song cleared, so Dr. Dre and Eminem had to just literally start all over and, just make their own beat or get a different sample or something. But because they weren't able to clear the original sample of the original song of As the World Turns by Eminem and Dr. Dre were not able to put or release the unmastered sequence of his song As the World Turns on the final cut or version of his Slim Shady LP album, which is really extremely frustrating. And again, I hate that Eminem and Dr. Dre didn't try to fight more, battle them out over it, like the original artists whose song they used, even though they changed it quite a bit. But for some odd reason, the original artists were still able to hear or detect or notice their original sample of their old song being used. And so, Eminem and Dr. Dre weren't able to use that version of Eminem's song, sadly and unfortunately. But I think it's also ridiculous and just insane and outrageous that the original artists, whoever the original artists were that Eminem and Dr. Dre sampled for the original version of As the World Turns, the unmastered sequence of Eminem's song there, that they expected $75,000 just to get it cleared, which is unbelievable. Like, that is just unacceptable. I mean, that's a quarter of $100,000, or maybe it's not a quarter of $100,000, but it's like, what I mean to say is it was almost $100,000 that they were expecting and wanting just to get their stupid ass fucking sample cleared, which is so very fucked up on their part. And I think those original artists were expecting and demanding way too fucking much money. But I wish that Dr. Dre would have at least tried to come to some sort of agreement or make some kind of deal with them. I don't know, like maybe give credit to them or mention them. I don't know. Like, I just wish they would have fought more and fought harder to get the original version of Eminem's song As the World Turns on the final version cut of his Slim Shady LP album. Also, there was a older original version of Eminem and Royce da 5'9's song Bad Meets Evil, but the original unmastered sequence of that song was called When Bad Meets Evil. Instead of being called Bad Meets Evil, it was going to be called When Bad Meets Evil. It was going to have a different beat originally in the unmastered sequence of that song of theirs, and also in the original unmastered sequence of Eminem and Royce da 5'9's song When Bad Meets Evil, because that was the original name or title of the song, if you will. They were not going to have like the opening sort of like almost story dialogue of the guy who sounds like a pretty much Wild West cowboy or something, and talking about the legend of Eminem and Royce da 5, or not Eminem, but Slim Shady and Royce da 5'9. And I mean, I think that little opening dialogue is kind of neat and cool or whatever, but I could have done without it, because I would have much rather preferred the original unmastered sequence version of Eminem's song or track, in other words, When Bad Meets Evil, compared to the one that was released on the final version or cut of Eminem's Slim Shady LP album. And also, because it had a different beat, a much better beat than the one released on the final version and cut of Eminem's Slim Shady LP album, the one that we ended up getting, but also there was different lyrics, and honestly better lyrics, in my opinion, on the original unmastered sequence version of Eminem and Royce da 5'9's song When Bad Meets Evil. Also, there was slightly different there was a slightly different beat or sample for the original unmastered sequence version of Eminem's song Just Don't Give a Fuck. I think he was going to still maybe have used the original Slim Shady EP beat of that song, because originally Eminem's song Just Don't Give a Fuck was originally first released on his Slim Shady EP, and the sample or the beat that Eminem used on the original Slim Shady EP version of that song, I think he was originally just going to also use on the Slim Shady LP version. However, I do love the version of his song Just Don't Give a Fuck that was released on the final version or cut of his Slim Shady LP album. And so those were the differences between those two albums of his, or those two different track lists. But also, just before I forget, on the original unmastered sequence version of Eminem's Slim Shady LP album, there would have been some things that I would have hated, such as the fact that on the original unmastered sequence version of Eminem's Slim Shady LP album, he would not have had songs like Role Model, Rock Bottom, or Still Don't Give a Fuck, which are three of the most best and greatest Eminem songs that he ever made and released early on in his rap career, at, of course, the very beginning of his rap career as a famous rapper. And the beats of all three of those songs are just amazing. They're magnificent. They're perfect. They're incredible. They're awesome. They're badass. They're pure fire. And if he would not have released those three songs, or tracks in other words, Role Model, Rock Bottom, and Still Don't Give a Fuck, his Slim Shady LP album would not have felt whole or completed if he would not have been able to release those three songs or tracks on the unmastered sequence of his Slim Shady LP album. So the interesting thing about me, at least, is there are things that I love about the original unmastered sequence of his Slim Shady LP album compared to the version of his Slim Shady LP album that he was able to release in like the final version or cut of his Slim Shady LP album. But then there are things that I prefer and love about the version of his Slim Shady LP album, the one that he ended up releasing to the public, to the world, instead of the unmastered sequence of his Slim Shady LP album. Because again, on the unmastered sequence of his Slim Shady LP album, he would not have had Role Model, Rock Bottom, or Still Don't Give a Fuck. And those three songs right there are important to his Slim Shady LP album. And again, like, if he was not able to put or release those three songs on the original unmastered sequence of his Slim Shady LP album, then obviously that album of his would not have felt whole or complete. And I don't know if anyone else would agree with me on there, but I have seen Reddit posts, even on the internet, of people on Reddit talking about the differences between the two track lists on the unmastered sequence of Eminem's Slim Shady LP album compared to the final version and cut of his track list that he ended up having to release in early 1999 when he was 26 years old, on February 23 of 1999 to be exact. And I remember seeing in the post people in like the comments talking about how Eminem's Slim Shady LP album would not have felt whole or complete if he wasn't able to release, Rock Bottom, which is definitely very important and has a lot of like depth and meaning and just power and just storytelling and whatnot on his Slim Shady LP album. So if that song would not have been on the unmastered sequence, well, that would have been really frustrating and just all around devastating, and would have been frustrating and would have been really sad and unfortunate. But anyways, now I want to talk about exactly why I personally feel or wish or believe that Eminem should have released his Slim Shady LP album at the very possible latest on November 13 in the year of 1998 and no later than that. So this will in a way be kind of a two-part video, but in one video. So the reason why I wish and strongly believe that Eminem should have released his Slim Shady LP album at the very latest on November 13 in the year 1998 is because, after all, that was the year that he was first signed to Dr. Dre's Aftermath record label company, a major rap record label company founded by Dr. Dre himself, on March 22nd in the year 1996, when Dr. Dre himself was 31 years old. And he signed Eminem pretty much or about 2 years after founding his own record label company, being Aftermath, on March 9 in the year of 1998. And at the time, Dr. Dre would have been 33 and Eminem would have been 25, but going on to 26. And I think it would have made complete and total logical sense for Eminem to have released his Slim Shady LP album on exactly November 13 in the year 1998, because again, that was the very same year that he himself was signed to Aftermath Records. And I think it would have been really fucking cool and awesome if Eminem would have shown the world that he, started working just like as soon as possible and like just right away and immediately after being signed to Aftermath Records. And, that would have given him 7 months in total to work on his Slim Shady LP album, because we're talking about like the rest of March of 1998, all of April of 98, all of May of 98, all of June, all of July, all of August, all of September, and by September of 98, that would have been 6 months since Eminem would have been signed to Aftermath Records. And in October of 1998, that would have been 7 months since Eminem would have been signed. And knowing that Eminem was really young at the time, for most of that year only 25 years old. I think 8 months later would have been a perfect time for Eminem himself to have dropped and released his Slim Shady LP album on November 13 of 1998. And also, the thing is, I would have loved it and preferred it if Eminem would have released his Slim Shady LP album soon after his 26th birthday. Like, soon after the year he would have turned 26. And I guess you could say in a way that he kind of sort of did, but in my personal opinion, I don't think Eminem's Slim Shady LP album should have even been released in the year of 1999. I think that is fucking bullshit, and I think it is an absolute missed opportunity that Eminem and Dr. Dre and the Bass Brothers were not able to successfully release Eminem's Slim Shady LP album in the year of 1998, the same exact year that he got signed by Dr. Dre himself, way back on March 9th of 1998. And I think it would have been the best decision business-wise for Eminem to have celebrated the year that he got signed to signed by Dr. Dre to Aftermath Records in the year of 1998 by releasing his very first mainstream debut hip-hop rap album, The Slim Shady LP, within the same year that he got signed. I mean, wouldn't you agree with me there? I mean, wouldn't that make complete and total logical sense? At least I personally feel like it would have. And that's why I personally feel, in my opinion, that it would have been the best and greatest decision business-wise and career-wise to have released his very first mainstream debut hip-hop rap album the same exact year that he got signed to Aftermath Records by Dr. Dre himself in the year of 1998, within the same fucking year, same exact year that he got signed, being 1998. And that is why I mainly and mostly wish and strongly believe that Eminem's Slim Shady LP album should have came out within the year of 1998. And it's not like I'm saying that Eminem should have released his Slim Shady LP album right after he got signed, because obviously he would have had to, work on it and, take his time. But I think, working on that album of his for like 6 or 7 months after being signed would have been more than enough fucking time to have released, or more than enough time to have worked on and completed his Slim Shady LP album, and then release it 8 months after working on it for 7 whole fucking months, which is a long ass time. I mean, that's a little over a half a year. And keep in mind that Eminem was really young at the time, 25 going on to 26. He was in his 20s. It's not like he was in his 40s or 50s like he is now. Not that he's in his 40s anymore, but like he wasn't even in his 30s. He was in his 20s. And, knowing that he was so young at the time, he would have had a lot of energy and, and a lot of like drive and ambition and excitement and, whatnot, and like effort and strength to have released his Slim Shady LP album within the same year that he got signed to Aftermath Records. And it would have been a dream come true, and it would have been the most coolest thing ever on his part if he would have been able to release his very first mainstream debut hip-hop rap album within the same year that he got signed to Aftermath Records. And I know I keep repeating myself here, but I'm just really fucking frustrated that he wasn't able to do that and accomplish that successfully for whatever fucking reason. And I also hate that Eminem wasn't able to release his Slim Shady LP album in the year of 1998, within the same year that he got signed to Aftermath Records, but 8 months after being signed, because of the fact that, like, when he released his underground debut hip-hop rap album, Infinite, which did not have enough songs, and it should have had 14 songs and not fucking 10 songs like it actually did in one skit. It should have had fucking 14 songs, and I don't give a fuck what anyone else thinks or has to say about that matter, because it doesn't change it from the fact that Eminem's Infinite album definitely did not have nearly enough songs as it should have. And I'm not saying that it should have had a shitload of songs or a lot of songs, but I think 14 songs for that album of his would have been the right just amount for a rap album released in the late 90s. And especially since it took Eminem until the age of 26 to release his first mainstream debut hip-hop rap album, and he didn't become famous as young as most old school rappers did before him, which is unfair and just so very fucked up, considering the fact that Eminem himself had been rapping since he was like fucking 14, 15, 16 years old, but it took him until the age of 25 to finally be discovered and signed by Dr. Dre to Aftermath Records, even though most rappers who started rapping when they were like 14, 15, 16 or whatever years old became famous either in their late teens or early 20s at the very oldest. But no, Eminem didn't become famous until his late 20s, which is just so very unfortunate. But Eminem could have at least, he could have at least done things that would have, he could have made up for the fact that he didn't become famous that young, or as young as compared to most other old school rappers did before him, whether it be Tupac, or Snoop Dogg, or Notorious Big, or Nas, or, Big L, or whoever the fuck they were. Like most old school rappers, I am telling you all the serious truth here, became famous in their late teens and early 20s. Like most old school rappers were releasing their debut albums or whatever when they were in their late teens, early 20s. And they were able to release a lot more albums than Eminem because they became famous way younger and way before he ever did. And Eminem didn't even really get to become a famous rapper that long in the 90s, which is really unfortunate. And that was also a missed opportunity. But again, Eminem easily could have made up for that shit by putting and releasing as many songs as he possibly could have on his earlier albums, even starting with his Infinite album. And he should have released 14 songs on that album of his, especially considering the fact that he was already 24 years old when he released it, and it was released in the late 90s anyways, almost in 1997, because of how late he released that album in the year of 1996, in November of 1996 to be exact, which was not that far from the year 1997. And then he released his Slim Shady EP in December of 1997 at the age of 25. And what's interesting is the fact that when Eminem released his Infinite album on November 12 of 1996 at the age of 24, and then he released his Slim Shady EP on December 15 in the year of 1997 at the age of 25 years old. So he released those two things a year apart, which is amazing to say the least. That is incredible. It goes to show how much he was working and how pretty much desperate and eager he was to become a famous rapper. Like, he literally released his Slim Shady EP just one fucking year later. Just one. I mean, that is outstanding. But then, if he would have been following that pattern, you would have thought, or you would think, that he would have released his Slim Shady LP album in the year of 1998. 1 year after his Slim Shady EP. I mean, I feel that would have made complete and total perfect sense, at least myself anyways. And I honestly, again, I know why he didn't and why he wasn't able to, because for the original unmastered sequence of his Slim Shady LP album, he wasn't able to get the samples cleared for certain songs, or tracks in other words, on that original version of his Slim Shady LP album. And because he was unfortunately unable to do that, he had to pretty much make an entirely new and different track list, which is the one that we ended up getting in the final version or cut of his Slim Shady LP album. But if he would have been able to get the samples cleared for his original unmastered sequence of his Slim Shady LP album, and if he didn't have any setbacks or pushbacks or any problems or issues behind the scenes with that version of his Slim Shady LP album, then obviously I'm pretty damn sure that he would have been able to release his Slim Shady LP album in the year of 1998, which he originally intended to, as I'm sure. But this brings me to the last and final thing that I want to talk about and mention in this video, which is the version of Eminem's Slim Shady LP album that I wish more than anything and strongly believe that Eminem should have released at the very latest on November 13 in the year 1998. And the version of his Slim Shady LP album that I wish he would have released, starting with the unmastered sequence and uncensored band version of his song or track, Hi, My Name Is, because that version of his song was much more controversial, much more offensive and gut-wrenching, which would have been perfect, released on the final version and cut of his Slim Shady LP album. And that brings me to the next version of his Slim Shady LP album track list that I really wish he would have released to the public, to the world, way back on what I wish would have been November 13 in the year 1998. Instead of releasing the lounge skit and his god-awful, piss-poor, garbage, pure sewage, horrible, terrible, awful, shitty-ass song, My Fault, which is not even nearly as good as any of the other songs off of his Slim Shady LP album. Instead of the lounge skit for track 10 and the song My Fault, which is by far the weakest song on that album of his, I wish he had instead put, for track 10, instead of the lounge skit, pointless, unnecessary skit, in my opinion, I wish he had instead put the unreleased, unmastered sequence song on his, from the unmastered version of his Slim Shady LP album, Take the World With Me, featuring Pace One and Bizarre, which would have been such a perfect, amazing, awesome, incredible, badass, and super cool song and track released on the final version and cut of his Slim Shady LP album for track 10. And the fact that Eminem did not release and include his song or track, in other words, Take the World With Me, featuring Pace One and Bizarre, was a missed opportunity. I don't care what anyone says. I mean, that is one of the best and greatest unreleased Slim Shady LP songs by far. And I would have definitely much rather preferred Eminem putting or releasing his song Take the World With Me, featuring Pace One and Bizarre, any day, instead of a stupid, unnecessary, pointless, dumb, retarded lounge skit for track 10, when it could have instead have been a song. And then instead of the song My Fault for track 11, I wish he would have put a finished, completed version of his unreleased and unfinished song or track, in other words, Ghost Stories, also known as Demon Inside, which you can listen to on YouTube, along with Take the World With Me, featuring Pace One and Bizarre. Ghost Stories is another missed opportunity on Eminem's part. And Ghost Stories was a song or track that Eminem and Dr. Dre worked on, probably back in March of 98. It was like one of the very first songs that Eminem himself worked on. But because it was leaked to the internet back in 1998, which is really messed up and unfortunate, Eminem decided to completely scrap it and not even finish it. And he's honestly a bitch for doing that, because just because one damn single song leaked to the internet from his Slim Shady LP album doesn't mean that everybody would have known about it. Yeah, a certain amount of people, I'm sure, but Eminem was also not really known by that time. He wasn't really noticed because he hadn't even released his first album yet. He was just starting to work on it. And if Eminem would have been a man and would have had balls and would have done the right thing, he would have fucking finished that song in its entirety, because also that would have been the only horrorcore rap song on his Slim Shady LP album. I mean, seriously. Eminem could have had a just incredible, amazing, powerful, awesome, intense horrorcore rap song, being Ghost Stories, aka Demon Inside, as early as his Slim Shady LP album, which would have been a dream come true. And maybe by him having at least one single horrorcore rap song, like a really like just creepy, disturbing rap song such as that, that probably would have helped and benefited his rap career later on when he released an entire horrorcore rap album being Relapse. I mean, maybe it would have helped his career out. I don't know. I could be wrong, but honestly, Ghost Stories, aka Demon Inside, would have been a much better and greater alternative song or track than compared to his shitty ass weak song My Fault. I would have taken a finished completed version of Ghost Stories, aka Demon Inside, any day over his shitty ass weak Slim Shady LP song My Fault, which I've always fucking hated so much. And I can't relate to the lyrics of that song anyways. It's stupid, it's dumb, it's retarded, it's moronic, it's idiotic, it's garbage, it's dumpster fire, it's pure sewage. I don't care what anyone says, and anyone who loves that song, good for you. But anyways, continuing on, I also wish that instead of putting the completely and totally unnecessary, pointless soap skit for track 16, Eminem should have instead put his song and track, another unreleased Slim Shady LP era Eminem song and track called Till Hell Freezes Over, which you can hear in its entirety on YouTube. And what is so painful about that song and track is the fact that Eminem finished that song all the way, but he didn't even release it on his Slim Shady LP album, which is so fucked up. And the beat of that song was one of Eminem's best beats. I'm not saying Eminem produced the beat himself, but whoever produced the beat for Till Hell Freezes Over did a fantastic job, to say the least. And Till Hell Freezes Over would have been just so much better and greater, and would have actually served much more meaning and purpose being released on the final version and cut of Eminem's Slim Shady LP album, rather than a pointless, unnecessary, stupid, dumb, retarded, idiotic, moronic soap skit that doesn't have that much importance or value or meaning being on Eminem's Slim Shady LP album. And what's so gay, incredibly gay, when it comes to Eminem's Slim Shady LP album is the fact that he had 6 skits on that album of his, which is way too fucking much. At the most, he should have had 4, but no more than 4. And those 4 important skits being the public service announcement skit, the Paul Calls M skit, the bitch skit, and the Ken Kniff skit. Those 4 actually had meaning and purpose and importance being on that album of his. But the lounge skit and the soap skit, no, fuck that. Fuck them both. They did not have to be or deserve to be on that album of his, on the final version cut of that album of his. And what's really weird is the fact that every other album that Eminem released after his Slim Shady LP album only had 4 skits, like his Marshall Mathers LP album, his Eminem Show album, his Encore album even, his Relapse album, all only had 4 skits. No more than that. They didn't have 6 skits. His Slim Shady LP album is the only album of Eminem's that he ever released in his entire rap career that had 6 skits, which is completely and totally ridiculous. And it makes no sense. Having 6 skits on that album, but then on the next album later, only 4. And then 4 on his Eminem Show album. Like, he only had 4 on his Marshall Mathers LP album, 4 on his Eminem Show album, 4 on his Encore album, and 4 on his Relapse album. But then his Slim Shady LP album has 6? Like, what the fucking hell? Why? That is so excessive. That is too much. That is overdoing it and going overboard with the amount of skits. Like, geez, dude, cool it. 4 is plenty. 4 is enough. My God. What the fuck was he thinking? What the fuck was he, the Bass Brothers, and Dr. Dre, or the entire Shady Records team thinking? Like, honestly. And it's just really sad and a pain in the ass that Eminem missed out on such a great and wonderful opportunity by putting and releasing and including his unreleased Slim Shady LP era song and track Till Hell Freezes Over on his Slim Shady LP album, the final version and cut of that album of his, because that song would have been greatly appreciated released on the final version and cut of that album of his. It would have been a dream come true. There would not have been one bad or even slightly weak song on that album of his. It was such a missed opportunity that he didn't include Till Hell Freezes Over for track 16 instead of the soap skit. I also wish that he would have just added one more extra song, being Get You Mad, which was released on the special edition of Eminem's Slim Shady LP album, but should have been released on the standard edition so that he could have had 17 songs total, 4 skits, so in total, track-wise, 21 tracks. And that is the way that Eminem himself could have easily made up for not becoming famous as young as most old school rappers did before him in their late teens and early 20s, and because he didn't become a famous rapper and start releasing albums until he was in his late 20s. Albums that he released as a famous rapper until his late 20s. But again, like I said, and the point I'm trying to make here is that he could have easily made up for that shit by putting and releasing as many songs as he possibly fucking could have on all of his earlier albums, which I feel, in my own personal opinion, should have been 17. Regardless of what anyone says, thinks, or believes themselves. Because in my opinion and point of view, Eminem should have had 17 songs on his Slim Shady LP, Marshall Mathers LP, Eminem Show, and instead of Encore, what should have been a Slim Shady LP 2, and so on and so forth. That should have been the case when it came to his albums, even his really early on albums. And anyways, to recap, on the final version cut of Eminem's Slim Shady LP album, he should have put the uncensored band version of his song, Hi, My Name Is, and he should have fought for the right to put and release the uncensored band version of his song Hi, My Name Is, instead of the one that he released. Or at least he should have kept the part uncensored where he raps about running over pedestrians and raping lesbians. He should have put Take the World With Me featuring Pace One and Bizarre for track 10 instead of and rather than the lounge skit. And then for track 11, he should have put Ghost Stories, aka Demon Inside. He should have put the unmastered sequence version of his song As the World Turns instead of the final version of that song of his that he released on that album of his, because the final version of his song As the World Turns sucked fucking balls because of the beat. The original beat on the unmastered sequence version of his song As the World Turns is so much better and greater than the final version that was released. For track 16, instead of the soap skit, he should have put Till Hell Freezes Over. He should have also put the unmastered sequence version of his and Royce da 5'9" song When Bad Meets Evil instead of Bad Meets Evil. And he should have included Get You Mad on the final version and cut of his Slim Shady LP album. So in total, 17 songs, 4 skits, in total 21 tracks. That would have been a dream come true. But sadly, he did not do that. And I'm really fucking pissed that he didn't do that. And I'm pissed that Eminem wasn't able to put and release the unmastered sequence version of his song As the World Turns instead of the one that he ended up having to release. And I also hate the fact that he wasn't able to put and release the original unmastered sequence version of his song When Bad Meets Evil instead of the one that he ended up releasing. But anyways, that's all I wanted to say in today's video. Let me know what you all think in the comment section down below. I'm out.